It's time to set the record queer. The plural of Alexis is Alexi. Trust me, I'm an Alexpert.
Is your door closed?
Yes.
With how clearly I can hear you, I'm a little worried about picking you up.
It is about as much as it's about as closed as it can possibly be, I think.
You should talk to your door about being more open.
Can we just cold open from there? Please?
Approved. Hello and welcome to Setting the Record Queer, a podcast where queer people talk about the pursuits and communities they love. This is episode 5, and it's about San Francisco indie music. My name's Alexis, my pronouns are it, its, and she, her, and I'm one of your hosts.
My name is Kaylee, my pronouns are she, her, and I wasn't actually expecting to cold open on that, but we're doing this now.
We're doing this now. We might go back and undo this later, but we're doing this now. So, hi Kaylee.
Hi, Alexis.
This past couple weeks have been busy.
Oh, yes, they have.
You've been busy with Speedrun Ragnarok.
Yeah, as I mentioned last week on the podcast, we have this big speedrunning marathon with the RPG Valkyries called Speedrun Ragnarok. It is currently going on. If you're listening to this podcast, you're too late to catch it live. We'll have all the videos up, hopefully by the time this airs. So if you want to go back and watch some stuff, we both did speedruns in it.
Yeah, but if you hear that and you're like, oh no, I wanted to watch speedruns, I've got something for you coming up on October 27th at 10 a.m. Eastern / 7 a.m. Pacific / approximately 16 Central European Standard Time. I am going to be doing a run at Games Done Quick Express, the first miniature GDQ, and it's taking place at TwitchCon. I'm going to be going to California. I've never been that far west before. I'm very excited. And that's going to be coming up on Saturday the 27th.
It is so hard to hear you say California and not do the wizard. California.
Speaking of games that could have appeared on The Wizard, I think I've never actually seen the movie because I'm a fake gamer girl. Last night, so I was watching in Speedrun Ragnarok a play of Super Metroid Link to the Past Randomizer, which if you've never seen it, it's a randomizer that combines the two games, and it's incredible that it exists. I was musing, why isn't there a Zelda 1 Metroid 1 randomizer? Because y'all know me, and y'all know I love Metroid 1, despite better judgment. And it turned out there actually was one, though it's not quite as robust as the Super equivalent. I was playing it last night, and it was really fun. Also, in the past couple weeks, I finally, after 155 hours, beat The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. I got all the shrines, and I beat up Ganon for a second time, and it was a trivially easy fight, but, you know. So yeah, that's been my couple weeks.
I've been doing prep work for this marathon and playing video games, and that's about it.
Video games. The world ends with you. Final Remix HD Chain of Memories, whatever, Kingdom Hearts memes came out today, and we played it for approximately 15 minutes before recording this podcast.
That is an exaggeration. We played it for substantially less than that.
Anyways, why don't we move on here? Kaylee, would you like to bring us to our guest?
So you're staying in a hotel in California. I know how this is gonna end. I should get another Alexis now, so I don't have to worry about it later. If you can't tell, Alexis wrote this out for me to read, and I read it verbatim.
Good job. That was so funny. You did great. But yes, today on the podcast, we have another Alexis, because clearly I'm not good enough. So, hi, Alexis.
Hi. And it's not a matter of being good enough. There just need to be more Alexises in the world. Alexis?
Alexis? Alexises? Alexi?
Ooh,
Alexi.
Yes. Because that's not actually someone else's name that I know. Anyway, yes, hello. Other Alexis and Kaylee. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. We're really excited to talk about music and stuff. So why don't you introduce yourself?
Okay. My name is Alexis Blair. I am a musician in San Francisco. I play a bunch of different instruments, and I sing, I play guitar, bass, drums, and I have been playing music really since I can remember being alive. And been performing on and off for a greater portion of my life, and now that I am more of an adult, I suppose, I am doing as much as I can to perform actually live as much as possible.
Cool. What are your pronouns?
Oh, yes. My pronouns are she, her.
So, Alexis, you've played in bands such as El Gato Dice, The Cryptors, The Kessel Run, and The Red Shades, most of which we'll get into later.
Yes.
You have quite the repertoire, which is pretty impressive. So how would you describe yourself as a musician? I know you play a bunch of different instruments and you're a songwriter. What's your kind of like focus?
It's changed over the years. My initial focus when I started like playing in bands in San Francisco was to just like join a band and play a bunch of shows. And at the time I was really into the 90s alternative scene and alternative metal kind of stuff. So stuff like Tool or Faith No More. And so a lot of my music at the time really reflected that. I was in a band for a while called Run Amok that started off as this sort of metal band and ultimately ended up into being more of a punk rock band. And that band ended like 2 or 3 years ago. So that's sort of where I'm at right now in terms of if you could call it my favorite genre of rock music. But as far as what I'm actually performing, I kind of just play in whatever projects that I find really interesting and exciting. So El Gato Dice is an indie rock band that is a little bit softer and a little bit, I guess, a little bit more mellow than I'm normally accustomed to playing or what I'm maybe known for. But like the songwriting is really great and it gives me an opportunity to play and sing with more melody as opposed to just screaming my voice out or something.
Yeah, totally understandable. Screaming kind of hurts, so
it's fun sometimes.
So you play a lot of instruments. Do you have a primary instrument?
I would say right now that my primary instrument is the bass guitar and the drums. I have the most experience playing the bass guitar live, but I am playing drums in 2 different groups right now, so that gives it a little bit more precedence. And I am currently working on a new guitar project. Like I'm writing songs for it, and at some point I would like to form a new band, of all things. And then I would play guitar in that one.
You really play everything and you sing too, correct?
I do.
Nice. And you mentioned songwriting. You hit everything. So I have a question for you.
Yes.
Of all the instruments you play, voice included, which instrument is the most queer and why?
Well, in a way, both the guitar and the bass, anything under the guitar moniker, could be considered my most queer instrument, if only because I have flag symbols and the transgender symbol. I've plastered it all over my instruments. So that wherever I go, even in like a cishet space, it is known that I am here and or queer.
And or.
I
figured it would be and. Although I guess theoretically you could not be here.
Yeah, you could just leave the guitar somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I hope not.
Oh, that's true. That's a
I
good
hope
point.
not.
Yeah. Yeah, in San Francisco, don't leave your guitar lying around.
I was here, but the queer stayed. There's still some queer here, regardless of,
Please mail guitar home.
No. I just if found, please call.
But okay, I'll make this a little more difficult. If you strip away the stickers, which instrument is the most queer? Like the instrument itself, or maybe the way you interact with it, or maybe you personally, the way you express yourself through it, or the kind of performative style you have.
Sure.
Which instrument is the most queer?
I think then the bass is probably the most queer. I tend to play that the most in terms of the bands I'm in, and my influences when it comes to playing the bass guitar come from a wide range of places and people. God, I don't know if there are actually any trans folks who play the bass that I'm like really, really aware of. So like bass guitar, regular guitar as well, in the sense that like Laura Jane Grace of Against Me is my hero, and as you do. So, okay, I'm rambling here. I'm gonna have to redo my answer and say that the guitar is the queerest instrument that I play, if only because it's important to me to be very present and very in the music community and also in the queer and trans community. And one of the best ways to do that is by being the front woman of a band. And that's because on the one hand, I can tell, all the non-queer spaces that I, as a queer woman, look at what I can do. And then I can tell all the queer spaces and the trans spaces and everyone else, look at what you can do.
Well said. I was not expecting as thorough of an answer to that sort of silly question.
Neither was I.
So you've told us a little bit about your musical history. Let's get back to that. So why don't you give us a rundown of like where you started with your different instruments and what kind of musical outfits you've been playing with other than the ones you've already mentioned.
Sure. When I was really, really young, I started playing the piano. Right now, I am not able to play the piano anymore because of not practicing reasons. So I've dabbled in the piano. I've dabbled in, like, I played the saxophone when I was in high school in like the wind ensemble. But it wasn't until about I was 13 or so that I started playing the drums. My little brother asked for a drum set for Christmas one year, and I ended up playing it more than him. And that was the first instrument that I ever played that no one had to tell me to actually practice. I just sat down and, oh, this is really fun. Let me just do this for an hour or two or until someone tells me to stop.
That tends to be how it goes with a full drum set until someone tells you to stop.
Generally, especially with the drums, right? I mean, because they're loud. It's more difficult to do that quietly. But then I started playing the bass guitar when I was about 18. Got into college and thought, I'm going to start playing the bass. Same thing happened. I did more playing the bass that first freshman year of college than studying, probably. Sorry, Mom. And I picked up the guitar a year later, and I've just sort of been playing around and teaching myself as much as I can ever since. And then since then, I have played in a bunch of different groups in the city, in San Francisco. The first I should say, though, is I do play music with my dad sometimes. We are in a cover band called Generation Gap, named as such because of the generational between him and me, and the fact that we try to play songs that he grew up with and then songs that I grew up with. So we'll play a lot of old like Americana, like Bob Dylan and Jim Croce and classic rock kind of stuff. But then we'll also play stuff from like the Decemberists or like, you know, a more acoustic friendly Green Day song or Foo Fighters or something.
That's really cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my dad is really the one who got me into playing music. He's been playing guitar since forever. And like I grew up with a musician in the house always noodling around or listening to records or something like that. So hi, Dad.
I have to appreciate how I feel like you have kind of like the traditional rock and roll musician story of like picking up instruments in a heat of passion and playing more than studying and hopping from band to band to band, and who needs formal lessons or anything like that. I like it.
Yeah, I've just tried to, you know, Dave Grohl it for as much as I can.
I mean, it worked for him.
Here's hoping then. Here's hoping. Fingers crossed.
Indeed. As we all know, the odds of succeeding in the music industry are super high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're better than succeeding in the podcasting industry.
Oh, true. Well, we're all trying.
We're all doing our best, and that's the most important thing.
Industry.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so I played in bands like Run Amok. I play with my dad sometimes. More recently, I started playing the drums in a band called the Cryptors, which is a garage rock band that is sort of more throwback to the 70s and 80s. So bands like the Kinks or like the Zombies or more a little bit more 80s and like 70s and 80s. There's bands like the Sonics or the Fuzztones, which if you go back and look at early garage kind of punk rock kind of stuff, that's the kind of stuff you find. So in the 90s, all the garage music that we think of now were like Green Day and Nirvana and all the folks that sort of like started out in their hometowns and then ended up making it big. In the 70s and 80s, it was bands like the Fuzztones and the Sonics who were just playing in their garage and decided to make records.
We didn't even need to ask you the question we were about to ask. Well played. Yeah, so You've already started talking about your bands. So that's the Cryptors. You've already mentioned El Gato Dice. Mm-hmm. Actually, I have two other outfits of yours that I want to talk about.
Okay.
So first there is the Kessel Run. Can you tell us about the Kessel Run?
Yeah. Kessel Run was a group with a little bit of a storied history. I came into it about 2 years into it where I was playing the drums. And then I came back into it after a time about a year later, and that was basically when this version of the band that you heard started. I was the guitar player, and we had Doug Crawford on bass, and eventually we had Chris Lightbody on drums. And Kessel Run was a nerd rock band nerd rock, geek rock, however you would like to call it. All of our songs were, about Star Wars or video games or Doctor Who, various, we're a bunch of nerds, but we also like to play rock music. So, a match made in heaven, maybe?
I really enjoyed it. I actually sat down and listened to a couple of the Kessel Run songs before recording this. I really enjoyed Blue Bomber, which was a song about... This was a song about how everything in the world is falling apart and politics is terrible and the media is terrible and we need Mega Man to come save us. And that was this song, and I loved it. My favorite of the Kessel Run songs was Player 2. I really liked this song for its lyric crafting, and without going too much into like the performance showcasey aspect of this, because we'll do that later, take a listen to these songs. They're really good. But like the lyrics to Player 2, to kind of describe them, each verse was a couple sets of lines, and I'm just going to paraphrase here. Life is like Bomberman. You run around screaming in fear, and then suddenly when you think you have it all figured out, you get blown up. The songs had me like smiling with like nerdy glee, like, oh, I get the reference, but also like just the creativity put into like kind of life is like, and then talking about how this video game is like a terrible life. And I thought it was really well done.
Yeah, we tried to make it as nerd friendly as possible, but also as not nerd friendly as possible. So, when y'all listen to it, and you can check us out at kesselrun.bandcamp.com. Please support the old band. We'd appreciate it. We hope that anyone who doesn't necessarily get the references about Time Crisis or Ghosts and Goblins can still enjoy the fact that we tried to craft these really good, like, sort of rock songs. We tried to get it so that our moms would understand them as well as like our friends. That's a really
good way to put that. And I think you succeeded at that goal, though maybe I'm a little bit biased given that I do know the things. So yeah, that's the Kessel Run. And I thought that project was super cool. And then the other one I want to talk about, and this is a currently ongoing project.
Yes.
I'm really excited about this one. It's called The Red Shades. And as it is self-described, it is a trans superhero rock opera.
Yes.
Take us through this.
Okay. So The Red Shades it's a rock opera. It's a musical written by Adrian Price and co-written by Matt Grandy, and he's our musical director. And The Red Shades tells the story of a young trans teenager who escapes her isolated, oppressive life in rural Nevada, and she escapes to the Tenderloin in San Francisco. This is 1960s, by the way. It's 1960s Tenderloin in San Francisco, where she discovers that she has superpowers, and she joins a group of similar trans folks with superpowers in San Francisco, and they are known as the Red Shades.
I love it. Kaylee, didn't we do a tabletop campaign of trans people with superhero powers that one time?
I mean, you're the one who wrote. You're all the ones who wrote all the trans characters. I didn't. Well, that's actually not true.
It was a party composed of almost entirely trans people.
And one conspiracy theorist who thought the Illuminati was behind the actual conspiracy. But that's a story for another time.
So yeah, let's talk about this a little more. So what's your role in the Red Shades?
So I am the drummer. I came in after the music was written to fill out the band. So I get to hit all the things, and as long as I hit them on cue, people seem to like it.
Yeah, that's playing drums. Great job.
One of the things about this particular show that I'm most interested in is the fact that it was really important for Adrian, who started out directing. We actually have our own director now. When Adrian started casting for it, it was really important that we get trans musicians and especially trans people of color to, in the band roles, in the acting roles, in the singing roles, because that's who it's the trans community at large that we think is that's our demographic. But it's also really important, I think, to have as much representation of the entire trans community in such a project.
Heck yeah.
I play the drums. Currently, Bella King is our guitar player, and she's amazing. Danny Robinson is on bass, and she's a genius on the bass guitar. We have amazing singers like Leah Ann Mitchell, who plays our lead character Ida. She is like, there are no words. I know we talked a little bit about what the showcase was going to be, but you'll actually get to hear what this is all about a little later, and you're going to be blown away. Absolutely. The whole thing is just such a great project to be a part of. It feels like such an important thing to for me as a member of a community that is historically marginalized. And it's really cool to have a play, to have an outlet for, where we get to be heroes, and we get to, we get to know that everyone has their place and that no one is alone. No one is alone in the world.
Awesome. So you mentioned not only musicians, but actors. So can you tell us, like, if I went to a Red Shades show, what would I be expecting?
So first off, there's no spoken dialogue. It's going to be more along the lines of Hamilton, in that the entire show is just is like a set of music. And in fact, our current performances are all just, the format is more akin to a rock show at like a bar or a club than a theater performance, in that we have actors, yes, but everyone is simply singing and with the band on stage, as opposed to like, with like blocking and walking around in sets and props and such.
That's a really interesting dynamic, like the combination of traditional theater and music. Because like generally my point of reference to something like rock operas would be more the Proto-Men, which is really just music that they perform with much enthusiasm for the story.
Right. And right now it's going to be closer to that, whereas in the future it will definitely, the plan is to have an entire stage production more akin to like Hamilton, or I guess like Hedwig and the Angry Inch.
Cool. I'm looking forward to that. So I know there aren't any Red Shades recordings out right now, or at least none that I could find. When could we be looking forward to something like that?
I honestly don't know when we will be doing any, like, the official cast recordings of the Red Shades. However, I was just dropped to my Facebook inbox by our director the last performance that we did, the second to last performance that we did at the San Francisco Trans Rally this past Pride weekend. Right before the Trans March, we were the last band to play, the last performance to play, and I was forwarded that footage, so we can actually take a listen to that a little bit later.
Yeah, we can drop that in the show notes and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that project's really cool. And I guess my final question about it is, when are you touring in Rochester, New York, so I can see it?
That is the question that I will be, that we've been asking for a while, specifically Rochester. I'm not really sure why, but
there's just something about Rochester, New York.
It works out. As soon as I know, I will be posting to all the social medias and linking to everyone that I've ever talked to, worked with, accidentally bumped on the train. Everyone will know.
Happens a lot in San Francisco. There's a lot of people there.
So could you tell us a bit more about your songwriting process? Okay,
yeah. My songwriting comes from a bunch of different sources. Sometimes it comes from media that I have consumed, books, movies, video games, and especially when I have a group like Kessel Run for that outlet, that's usually where that stuff sort of comes out. My personal songwriting tends to be more introspective and focuses a lot on sort of how I feel and how I'm interacting with sort of the world around me. So I've got a few too many songs about like my depression and my anxiety, but also sort of how I feel about relationships and how I feel about the sort of, not so much the political, but sort of the cultural feel of the world at large, and sort of where my place is in that space. Stuff about not so much necessarily being trans, but sort of always feeling like I'm in this sort of other group than everyone else, from being a trans woman and being a woman of color. I'm Korean, stuff like that. Just sort of my place in the world compared to everyone else.
Sounds like interesting music.
I hope so. But then my other stuff, when it comes to like when I'm playing the drums, when I'm playing the bass, I try to absorb as much of the material as I can. And it's important to me to really click with the rest of the musicians, the rest of my band. I don't like to be in groups that I feel I am too, like, where I feel like my style doesn't quite work. I don't like trying to fit my style in with other people. I like adapting whatever I'm doing to the style that's being played. So I can hit really hard in something like the Cryptors, where it can be a little bit more punk rock. And I get to do a whole bunch of stuff with the Red Shades because the influences of the various music in that are far-reaching, from stuff like the Dresden Dolls to Sly and the Family Stone and anything in between.
Cool. So you very clearly have some experience in what you do. You have a lifetime of it. You have a resume full of it. And you probably heard answers to and been asked this exact question before, but what would be your advice for getting started as a musician, and particularly getting started as, a musician attempting to do music professionally?
Well, the first thing I want to say is I believe it is never too late to learn a new instrument. Whether you are, whether you're like a little kid and want to learn, whether you are a teenager or a young adult or an old adult, whether if you are having fun learning the instrument and just playing around, then that in and of itself can be very rewarding. And that's one of my favorite things about playing music, is just being able to have a tangible record of what I produced, whether or not it's actually being recorded or not. As far as becoming a professional musician, that's going to be a little bit harder because I am not really a professional musician. I do have a day job, but as far as playing music on at least a semi-professional level, or even playing at a professional level, you just have to know that the music scene, the music landscape is constantly shifting and changing. Even music that is objectively very good or even just subjectively by like a ton of people may not necessarily get a lot of traction just due to what else is out there, because the music industry at large, quote unquote, is fickle and kind of difficult to permeate. What I find is more interesting and much more rewarding is find something that you are really good at, find a way to make that unique, and then find the people who want to hear that. And the great thing about the internet these days is anyone can set up a storefront, and, modern technology, anyone with a Mac computer can start recording music. And even on any other PC, like we're using Audacity right now, and it's free.
Whoa, you're spoiling the podcast magic.
This is secrets. We use really elaborate high-tech technology.
I'm using Audacity right now, and it's free. Anyone can download it. And if you're interested in making music, you totally should. That's what I got to say.
We're using dark black magic that took about 1,000 years to conjure.
By setting the record corporate, our subsidiary.
This podcast has been 1,000 cursed years in the making. That's good advice. I've heard the answer to that question over and over and over again, and I think that was actually a pretty unique point. Can we talk a little bit more about, you mentioned like storefronts. What would be some like recommended websites for you? Like if you're trying to start a music career, where do you think people should, focus their attempts and energy?
A great place to go is to set up a Bandcamp page. Just go, it's bandcamp.com. I am not a sponsor. Bandcamp is where I have done a majority of the selling of my music. Whether it's with Castle Run or Run Amok or El Gato Dice. And it's really simple to set up. They don't take much of a cut of the proceeds. And, as far as storefronts go, and they also, you can set up merch with them as well. So if you're a band up and coming that has merch ideas and has music recorded and want to sell it to your fans, Bandcamp is one of the best ways to do it. If you just want people to hear your music, SoundCloud is a great choice.
This podcast is on SoundCloud.
This podcast is in fact on SoundCloud.
Well, I mean, not right now, but this podcast will be there.
Setting the Record Queer, the podcast, is on SoundCloud.
Yep.
Yeah, it's there are plenty of places to go if you're interested in physical media. There are plenty of different places where you can order CDs, where you can distribute your stuff to the bigger storefronts, such as like the iTunes Store or the Google Play Store or like Spotify or Apple Music or Pandora. And those are places like CD Baby or DistroKid. CD Baby is probably the easiest one for me to recommend, only be like over the airwaves, so to speak, just because it's easy to spell. It's the letter C, the letter D, Baby. It's the shortest. Everything else is a little longer and might be potentially harder to remember.
I mean, in an industry as fickle and dense and frustrating as the music industry, easy to remember is a good thing.
Oh yeah, that's the other thing. Even if you have the best band name, if it's hard to Google, no one's gonna be able to find it. Sad to say, I've learned that the hard way.
Oh yeah, with the Kessel Run. That's actually very funny because I actually went to go look up the lyrics to that Kessel Run song and I could not find them. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Kessel Run being one of the nerdiest references ever is unfortunately hard to find when your band is called that.
So don't name your band after something popular. Great advice. So let's talk about the music scene, like the San Francisco music scene. I'm curious what it's like gigging, what kind of community there is to it, if there's some sort of way that everyone kind of communicates or gets along, and particularly what's it like being queer in this music scene?
Sure. So I will say this, when I started playing music in San Francisco, in the Bay Area at large, I was not out. This was pre Alexis, we'll say.
Those were dark days, indeed.
They were. Don't get me wrong. In the past few years, since coming out and since sort of, performing as Alexis, there are a fair number of female musicians in the city, and there's a big open mic scene in the Bay Area. Places like Hotel Utah and Bazaar Cafe are like that in and of itself is a fairly large pool of folks who get together on like Tuesdays and Thursdays and just play for each other, and then they go out and create shows based on that. There have been people get on other people's shows and other people's bands, and there's there are even like performances and festivals all based on comprised of those musicians. So that's one of the best places to find people who to listen to yourself and to listen to you. The scene itself is kind of fragmented these days in San Francisco because there's a more like heavy rock and metal scene that's a little bit more underground, but still very prevalent with bands like Lowcaster and Black Wolf. And then there are some more like, pop rock groups that seem to be doing fairly well for themselves. Like I have friends in a band called the Y-Axes, and Survival Guide is also one of my favorite groups from the Bay Area. As for being queer in the scene, I find that for the most part, when I play a show, I try to present myself very femininely. As an individual, I tend to I tend to swing around on the scale of whether or not I present myself more femme versus a little bit more androgynous or masculine. And so part of being queer and being trans, especially in the music scene in San Francisco, is I want people to know that, hopefully you think I'm pretty. Maybe at first glance you might think I was, any other girl, but I am in fact I'm in fact trans. Look at what I'm, check it out. This is what I'm doing. I would say that San Francisco is a somewhat easier place to do that in. Not everywhere in the United States or in the world is the safest place to do that. And so I'm definitely lucky, and I feel like I do have some amount of privilege in that regard. But even so, if and when I ever go to other places in the in the country, in the world, I'm not taking them off. It's really important that I can communicate even silently with anyone else from the community, whether I actually speak with them or not. And to me, it's worth connecting to those people. The inherent dangers are worth it to me.
Yeah. No comment. That was good job. That was poetic.
I guess do you have any upcoming events, shows, releases in the near future?
Yes, I will mention that my indie rock band, El Gato Dice, has recently released the band's third CD, third album. The first record that they ever did was called Uno. The second record they ever did was called Dos. And therefore, the third record is called The Search for the Yeti. No.
Makes sense.
No, the third record is
as you do.
The third record is called
as
Trace.
You do.
There may be a quattro in the future, but in any case, if you do a search for us on Facebook, El Gato Dice, ELGATO DICE, El Gato Dice, but it's Spanish, so, or go to our website elgatodice.com. You can find links to check out our music and to perhaps buy it, maybe. As far as upcoming shows, El Gato Dice is playing Bottom of the Hill, which is one of the best venues in San Francisco. So anyone who is Bay Area local, you should totally come check us out on October 28th. That is a Sunday, playing with some really awesome bands. We're playing with Scorpio Moon, and we're playing with Apopka Darkroom. These are two really, really great indie bands. I'm not just saying that because my girlfriend is in Scorpio Moon.
Now I'm just picturing this like Romeo and Juliet band rivalry girlfriendship. I'm assuming I'm way off here, but that's what's going on in my head right now. It's like forbidden love.
I mean, even if it was, we'd still be doing it, but it's not so forbidden. We've played a few shows together actually, and it's really cool to be able to, also we get to share cars, which is good because musicians such as us don't have big touring vans and trailers and stuff. So, cutting costs is good.
All right. Well, why don't we move on into our performance showcase? So every episode of this podcast, we present a sample of our guest's work or research or practice or whatever it may be. This takes a different format in every episode, but this is frankly by far the easiest time we have ever had with this because you are a musician and we are a podcast, an entirely audio medium. So all we need to do is play one of your songs.
Cool.
So why don't you tell us what song you've selected for us, the band, what role you had in it, and then we'll take a listen and then we'll talk about it.
Cool. So this is going to be a performance from the Red Shades. The song that we're going to do, I think, is called, it's called Outta Here. Is a song about our main character, Ida, who is being played by Leah Ann Mitchell in this show, is dreaming of a life she can have that's her own, where she can be who she wants to be and not feel like she's being stifled by an oppressive father and a community that doesn't understand. And it's her dream to find a place where she can be free and be herself.
All right, let's take a listen.
We need your hands in the air for this one.
She's alone with my boy. I take care of the score, taking me out of here. I flip on it too, while her eyelids are glued. And they say up the Jews, I get out of here. I close every blind from the front to behind, so nobody can find that I'm out of here. With my fingers
That was really good. Oh my gosh. I really enjoyed that. So I guess first, let's talk about the writing stuff, and then I want to talk about the music stuff, and then we'll talk about the queer stuff. So that's our agenda here.
Okay.
I understand one of these things as a non-musician.
So I'm curious, you talked about this whole thing being kind of written by one person. Did these musicians kind of have an influence on the writing? And if so, what form did that take? And if not, how did you as musicians kind of adapt to this stuff that was written for you when maybe you're typically used to being in bands where you're writing your own songs?
Sure. Adrienne Price is the creator and primary writer of the Red Shades. She collaborated with Matt Grandy, and together they were, and they worked on the music together. One thing that Adrienne always does when she's about to show us new stuff from the show is she'll give us a playlist of sort of inspirational songs that she kind of got some of her influence from, in terms of like, I want the guitar to kind of sound like this, or I want the drums to kind of have this kind of beat to it. And I think that it's just a testament to the musicians that perform. Matt Grandy was on the keyboard in that clip. Bella King was our guitar player. Danny Robinson was our bass player. I was on drums, and of course, Leah Ann Mitchell was our singer. And I think it's a testament to everyone's versatility as musicians that we're able to sort of switch from something like really driving like that to a more ballady kind of thing the very next song.
Yeah, no kidding. So let's get into some like nitty gritty music stuff and confuse Kaylee a little bit. So what I really liked about the song musically, for those who don't know, I do have a background in like playing and listening to and analyzing music and stuff like that. And while I'm certainly no professional, I at least very minimally know what I'm talking about. Very minimally. So what I really liked about this song was kind of the way the different instruments sort of blended together, both in terms of the sound as like a recording engineer myself, but also in terms of kind of the way the parts flowed together. So you had, the very like chords laying down the harmony guitar. You had the keyboard melody filling out that high space and sort of its rhythm contrasting with the bass guitar doing a very, not really like funk, but a very active part, not just doubling the root of the guitar. And then I feel like your drums really brought all of that together. And so I'm not going to go into a bunch of deep questions about like the other instruments, but I do want to talk about your drum performance a little bit. One thing I really enjoyed about this song was how you not really switch styles, but switch sort of almost performance speeds, where during the verse you had that very fast 4 on the floor hi-hat, spy movie action beat, whatever you want to call it. And then it opened up into the chorus into that very dramatic wide cymbal halftime beat. So where did that come from?
So part of it was sort of originally what we all sort of were going for, was that sort of 4 on the floor kind of, and that was the basis for everything else, I think, where it allowed Bella to just, to lay down those, to lay down the rhythm there, and, Danny to lay down, and then it gives Matt and Leah Ann room to sing as needed, as much as they want. As far as the chorus, that was just me wanting to hit things really hard.
I mean, I think it works out really well. It's sort of like you have the fast, and then it opens up to the, kind of a little bit louder, a little bit slower. And I feel like that flow back and forth works really well.
That's one of the, I feel like my drumming is kind of informed by, I would say, some of the early drumming of the 60s, a little bit of the 70s, but a lot of just that sort of open, loud chorus 90s kind of music, where everything just sort of opens up and you just, you hit the crash cymbal or the ride cymbal just as much as you can, and just to make everything sort of like flash.
Yeah, I really liked it. As a drummer myself, I really enjoyed it. So I guess, and then the third item on our agenda is, let's talk about the queer stuff.
Yeah.
So, we know this is a trans superhero rock opera that is being performed by mostly queer and trans people.
Yes.
But how do you feel that like your queerness and your collective queerness as a band and an outfit and a performance kind of permeate the way you perform and express these songs?
Well, for me, this particular project is so important, and it's such a powerful piece that, it just makes me want to give it my all, just leave it all out on the stage. It's very important that I work really hard to know all my parts and to perform well, so that in order to look good, representing the band and the community and the sort of like trans and queer community, but also in order to draw people in who wouldn't normally who wouldn't normally be interested in the subject matter, but like the riffs and the lines and like, the rhythms and stuff.
So you're telling me the trans agenda is to trick and confound the cis with nice sounding music.
Trick is not the word I would use. Bamboozle. Bamboozle is the better
Bamboozle.
word.
I like it. Well, you heard it here first. That is the official new trans agenda. So get on that, everyone.
Yes.
Everyone take out your bamboozlers.
I don't want bamboozle.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that with us. We'll have the link to the video in the show notes so you can see the performance happening too. And of course, you can find more about the Red Shades all over the place, and we'll get to that later. So let's get into some of our listener questions.
Ooh, yes.
So for every episode of this podcast, we take questions from you, our listeners, to give to our guests and even ourselves if you want. And you can give us those questions on Twitter at strqueercast, via email at settingtherecordqueer@gmail.com, or in our community Discord, where you can hang out with a bunch of other Setting the Record Queer listeners, as well as ourselves and some of our guests and production staff at bit.ly/strqcord. So our first question for this week is from @tentativelygame on Twitter. What is your favorite super specific weird niche musical genre?
Ooh, okay. It might be acoustic pirate metal.
That sounds awesome.
Specifically.
That sounds awesome.
I only know of one band that is acoustic pirate metal. They call their music heavy mahogany.
That's amazing.
They're a band called the Dread Crew of Oddwood, and they play really loud, fast, heavy music on nothing but acoustic instruments and the toy piano.
I'm going to have to listen to this. That sounds amazing. And I'm a total sucker. I'm a total sucker for acoustic instruments, so count me in.
And I'm a total sucker for weird gimmicks.
2 for 2.
If there's any other, it would be like specific types of like chiptune indie rock or something like that. Really just a lot of my favorite bands fall under those categories.
Our next question is from @Jankar99. If you could get any two musicians to do a collaboration, which would you pick?
Any two musicians to do a collab.
Musicians or bands.
Or bands. This is also true.
Does it specify living or dead?
Nope.
It does not.
Okay. Well then, I would love, like, the first thing that comes to mind, honestly, is I would love for Laura Jane Grace of Against Me to work with Dave Grohl, just because I think that, I think they're both stellar musicians, they're both stellar producers, and to have them collaborating on something would just sort of be the dreamgasm come true.
So follow up to that. What would be your dream collab involving you? Who would you want to play with?
Probably Dave Grohl and Laura Jane Grace.
Dave Grohl and Laura Jane Grace featuring Alexis Blair. Sounds great. I'm in. Good luck.
Yes. Hopefully they both will will listen to this podcast and hit me up on Twitter @TheBlairSwitch, please.
or just be on the podcast. That would be nice too.
That would also be amazing.
Yeah. I don't know offhand if Dave Grohl is eligible for this podcast.
We could get Laura Jane Grace,
but Laura Jane Grace would be pretty cool.
I don't know music at all, and I know who that is.
I'm down.
Anyway, we're now into our final segment of the podcast, which is Kaylee's question of the week. Every week, I ask a pretty normal question, I would say. Things that you would probably be asked when purchasing a movie ticket at the theater. That's what defines a normal question. Like, would you like popcorn?
Obviously.
And our question this week is, if you could form a band with you and 3 historical figures, that is, any person who is not currently alive and not a musician.
Ooh.
Who would you want in your band? What genre would you be, and what would you call the band?
Let's see. I think I would want Cleopatra in the band.
Damn it, you took one of mine.
I would want Cleopatra in the band. I would want Abraham Lincoln in the band. And I want Malcolm X in the band.
Sounds amazing. I'm in.
Yeah, that sounds pretty cool.
Let's see. And we would we'd actually probably be some sort of proto super historical Rage Against the Machine kind of band. Very political, very critical of society and all that. And because it's terrible, and because it's, and when we're sort of making fun of ourselves, the band would be called Theater X.
I love it. Kaylee, do you want to go next?
I was gonna take Cleopatra, which you already took, but there's no rule against repeat answers.
Doesn't mean she can't be in multiple bands.
Yeah, this is true. Cleopatra's in both our bands.
I mean, given that she's dead, she doesn't have many obligations right now, so...
And then I would take Queen Victoria, and then I would take Boudica, and we would be a generic Disney pop group. We would be named whatever the marketing team decided was the most profitable.
Like, that's the name?
No. No, we're not that creative.
Dang. Okay, so my answer to this question, I want Odysseus from the Odyssey.
Mm-hmm.
I want Richard Nixon, famously not a crook. Odysseus is significant because he was the one who planned the Trojan horse.
Right.
And they and me would be the musicians. And then what I want to do is like a Bit Brigade style thing where one member of the band plays video games. And we play along to the music of the video games. And to play the video games, I want Todd Rogers, because let's be real, his career is dead.
Oh. Oh.
And I think we would be called something along the lines of none of us cheated, lied, or deceived in our lifetimes ever, I promise. All right. That was a good question. Thank you, Kaylee. So that's about it. Thank you so much for coming onto this podcast and telling us all about all of your musical projects and everything. Oh. If you have a good answer to Kaylee's question of the week, please send it to us on Twitter, email, or Discord.
If you send it to us on Twitch, we'll still get it. You shouldn't, though, because it's probably the least reliable of these methods.
We like to feature good answers to Kaylee's questions of the week. Also send over your questions and stuff. Alexis Blair, where can our wonderful listeners find you and your shows and events and your discography?
You can find me on Twitter. My Twitter and Instagram, both of my handles there are at the Blair Switch. So it's TheBlairSwitch. The best way to find my music and stuff online is at alexisblair.com. Again, that's ALEXISBLAIR.com, where most of my work is on there. If there's something that's not on there already, then I will, it'll be on there very soon in terms of where you can buy it and purchase it. And it normally has all of my upcoming dates. You can also check me out on Facebook at facebook.com/Alexis Blair. I don't use it that often, but if enough people follow me, then I will probably have to, right?
I mean, if enough people start listening to us, we'll have to eventually make a good podcast. I think that's basically the same thing.
I please do not sell yourself short. This has been wonderful.
Yeah, so definitely go listen to all of Alexis's music. It's really good. My favorites of the ones that I listened to were Player 2 by the Kessel Run and Colossus by Run Amok. Those were fun. And go check out the rest of that Red Shades video also. So first, I just want to say that at the top of our show notes for this kind of outro segment, it says Alexis plugs whatever. And I was like, wait, I don't get to plug things first. The guest goes first. Oh. And I think that sort of idea has permeated the planning of this whole episode. Anyways, hopefully you liked this podcast. You can listen to Setting the Record Queer on iTunes, which you can find at settingtherecordqueer.com right now, on SoundCloud, Google Play, Stitcher, and Spotify. If there's somewhere else you'd like to hear this podcast, please let us know. To get in contact with us, to let us know where you might want to hear the podcast, give us your feedback. If you have a suggestion for who or what could be on this podcast, or if you think you'd be a good fit for this podcast, you can get in contact with us on Twitter at STRQueercast, via email at settingtherecordqueer@gmail.com, or in our Discord, where you can hang out with other Setting the Record Queer listeners, our hosts, and a pretty fair sampling of our guests and technical production friends. And that is going to be at bit.ly/STRQcord. If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review, leave a like, follow us, tell a friend, or talk about us on social media. Those two are really, really helpful to us, and we would deeply appreciate it forever. Our logo was made by Cubotic. That's at Cubotic, QBTIC on Twitter, and Cobot, QOBOT.tumblr.com. Our theme music was made by Thrill Me Music, and you can find more about her at thrillmemusic.squarespace.com. This podcast was edited by Kaylee and mixed and mastered by yours truly, Alexis. Kaylee, where can our good, wonderful listeners who have bared with me talking for way too long now find you so they can listen to you talk instead?
Nowhere. I'm a ghost. You can find me on Twitter at WitchesHex, that's WITCH Hex, or on Twitch at the same name, but with an underscore between witches and hex.
I've always wanted to be dating a ghost. That's awesome. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Princess Proto, and on Twitch or YouTube as Proto Magical Girl, or Twitch at proto.ml. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. We'll see you again in like 2 weeks. Thank you, other Alexis, for coming on. See you around.
Thanks for having me.